We begin today's show looking at the Trump administration's escalating threats of war against Venezuela and the region. On Sunday, the U.S. docked a warship in Trinidad and Tobago. The Pentagon's also deployed the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, which can hold at least 90 airplanes and attack helicopters, with Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro accusing the Trump administration of fabricating a new eternal war.
Y el pueblo de los Estados Unidos lo sabe.
And the people of the United States know that they're making up a new eternal war. They promise that they will never enter a war, and they're making up a war that we will avoid. How? With the mobilization of the peoples of South America. As South America and the Caribbean all say, no to war, yes to peace, yes to prosperity, yes to harmony, and living together.
There are approximately 10,000 U.S. troops, both at sea and on shore in the Caribbean, many stationed in Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth Friday confirmed the U.S. had struck another vessel in the Caribbean, killing at least 6 people, whom Hegseth accused without evidence of being drug traffickers. The U.S. has carried out at least 8 naval strikes on boats in the Caribbean and 2 others on vessels in the Pacific Ocean, killing over altogether 40 people. The Trump administration Friday also announced sanctions against Colombian President Gustavo Petro, his family, as well as Colombian Interior Minister, swelling tensions between the U.S. and Colombia. Last week, Petro recalled Colombia's ambassador to the U.S. back to Bogota and recently accused the U.S. of committing murder for killing a Colombian fisherman in one of the Trump administration's boat attacks on the Caribbean in mid-September. Trump responded by calling Petro a lunatic and a, quote, illegal drug leader. Petro has also blasted the U.S. for attempting to destabilize the region under the guise of combating drug trafficking. President Petro spoke at a massive rally in Bogota Friday following news of the U.S. sanctions against him.
Pues de ahí tenemos que aprender.
To the current government of Donald Trump, we must not respond by kneeling. We must respond, as humanity has already done, by standing firm and taking to the streets to defend people's rights, the rights of democracy, not to be governed by tyrannies. I've never done business. I don't have $1 in the United States. There's no account to freeze. I have no desire, and I never will, to do business in the United States.
For more, we're joined in our New York studio by Alejandro Velasco, associate professor at NYU, where he's a historian of modern Latin America. Antonio Velasco is a former executive editor of NACLA Report on the Americas and author of Barrio Rising, Urban Popular Politics and the Making of Modern Venezuela. He was born and raised in Venezuela. Professor Alejandro Velasco, it's great to have you with us. Let's start off with the latest U.S. attack, bringing to 10 the number of vessels the U.S. has bombed in the Caribbean and the Pacific.
It's horrifying on so many levels. On the one hand, of course, we have these competing interests that are in fact converging within the Trump administration. You have those who are intent on ousting the Venezuelan government, especially Marco Rubio. You have Pete Hegseth, who's intent on starting war, even though Trump has said that he doesn't want to start wars. You have expat oppositions, including Maria Corina Machado, who has openly said that they want an intervention and then to be able to provide the United States with Venezuela's oil.
She just won the Nobel Peace
who
Prize.
Just won the Nobel Peace Prize.
President Trump should win the Nobel
Correct.
Peace Prize.
In fact, it said that it should have been him, and that she gave the award to him on his honor. And so all of these competing and conflicting interests that in other situations might not in fact align are seeing Venezuela as an instrumental piece in order to achieve their own particular ends. And of course, who's left out of this equation are Venezuelans in Venezuela, who would suffer tremendously the brunt of a chaotic invasion.
I wanted to turn to President Trump last week, asserting he had the authority to continue to launch airstrikes against boats in international waters without a congressional declaration of war.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. okay? We're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead.
We're just going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. I mean, even Republican Congressman Rand Paul, the Kentucky senator, objected, speaking on Fox News Sunday.
The Constitution says that when you go to war, Congress has to vote on it. And during a war, then, there's a lower rules for engagement. People do sometimes get killed without due process. But the drug war or the crime war has typically been something we do through law enforcement. And so far, they have alleged that these people are drug dealers. No one said their name. No one said what evidence. No one said whether they're armed. And we've had no evidence presented. So at this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings. And this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public, so it's wrong.
Just to be clear, that's Republican Senator Rand Paul. Professor Alejandro Velasco, your response. Again, they haven't pretended even to present evidence on either the strikes in the Pacific or in the Caribbean. The number of people killed, at least 40 at this point.
Part of it is a show of force, not only to Venezuela and the region, but it's also a show of force domestically to opponents in the United States whose activism is increasing, to say that they are, in fact, above the law, that they do not care about the law. Yes, they can, talk about what and how this fits into particular frameworks of the past and precedent. But the reality is that you even now have Republicans coming out and saying, no, this is not only illegal, but this is in the context of lack of oversight, extrajudicial killings.
So talk about the sanctioning also of Colombia at the same time. I mean, escalating pressure in all of these areas. And Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, who had that double title before, I think it was Henry Kissinger,
that's right.
Now wielding immense power. He has had a long time vendetta against Nicolas Maduro. Talk about how much power he's wielding at this point. As President Trump in the last few hours said something like, or refused to rule out a run himself for president. He also talked about Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance as a team for the 28 election.
No, absolutely. What's fascinating and disturbing about Marco Rubio is that his animosity towards Venezuela, his sort of centered-mindedness on Venezuela and ousting the government certainly precedes Maduro. It goes all the way back to Chavez. And what he has discovered now, with the power that he has, is that his agenda, which is primarily ideological, he primarily just wants to get rid of the Cuban government, right? That this has long been his primary mission.
He's Cuban-American.
He is Cuban-American. And so he knows that he can't sell Trump on ideology. He can't sell Trump on the idea we're going to commit troops, we're going to commit a ground invasion just on the basis of ousting a communist. So he has to find other ways to do that, and he's found it through drugs, right? But in order to make that more of a credible threat, he also has to tie it to Colombia, which is a major drug producer in the way that Venezuela is not. So in some ways, Petro here has become involved in this larger kind of effort to frame what's going on in the Caribbean and in Venezuela in particular as a larger war on drugs, when in fact it's primarily Marco Rubio's ideological project.
So the increased sanctions on Petro, his wife, and others in the Colombian government. Also, Petro has been fierce around criticizing Israel on Gaza. Do you think that plays in?
It does, only insofar as it allows for this narrative to cement itself. But in fact, Marco Rubio, because he is the one that's driving this policy, all he wants to do is to oust the government in Venezuela in order to then oust the government in Cuba. He needs to oust the government in Venezuela to show Trump that this is something that we can do, and we can do it so easily. And as a result, there's nothing that Cuba can provide us Venezuela can provide us oil, Cuba can provide us nothing, but it's okay because we've got this.
I also want to talk about Argentina. The far-right president, Javier Milei's party, won a decisive victory in Argentina's midterm elections yesterday, picking up 14 seats in the Senate, 64 in the lower house of Congress, still short of a congressional majority for Milei's party. It comes after Trump earlier this month promised a $40 billion bailout for Argentina if Milei's party was victorious. Now, Trump told reporters, quote, "We've made a lot of money based on that election." Since taking office in 2023, Milei has imposed painful austerity measures in Argentina, slashing thousands of jobs, curbing public investments in infrastructure, healthcare, and education, which have led to widespread protests. So go to what is happening here. I mean, here in the U.S., millions face losing food benefits, health benefits, but President Trump is promising It's $20 billion of government aid, and then supposedly Bessent and his friends, the Treasury Secretary, will give another $20 billion and make money at the same time. What about Trump saying he's going to make money out of this?
I mean, it's so brazen, right? And we've seen this as Trump's MO. But it also speaks to a larger and more troubling reality, which is that he's at the same time building, in fact, a global Trumpist coalition. Milei has absolutely bought into it. There are others in Ecuador and in other parts of Latin America, obviously in El Salvador, who very much fashion themselves as Trumpists in a different place. And what's fascinating, of course, is that this completely belies the discourse of people like Rubio and others that we're intervening in Venezuela in order to promote democracy. Of course, what they're promoting is a Trumpist version of an entirely materially interested, foreign policy and domestic policy agenda. And so, what's surprising about the case of Argentina is that it's not the first time that the United States has essentially extorted Latin American voters by promising massive amounts of deal in order to have a particular electoral result. This happened in Panama. This happened in Nicaragua in 1990 before the referendum there that ousted the Sandinista government. And so this is a well-worn pattern in Latin America with the United States.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us. We continue to cover this. Alejandro Velasco, associate professor at New York University, NYU, where he's a historian of modern Latin America, former executive editor of NACLA, the report on the Americas, and author of Barrio Rising, Urban Popular Politics and the Making of Modern Venezuela, born and raised in Venezuela. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.